And we are back for our second best of one of the day. Already sent one team down to the loser side of the bracket. That was a number 1 seed in North America in the Hounds. And now we get our look at the number 3 seed from North America in this matchup. But we cannot move any further without me thanking who else is powering us here in the SPL this year and SMITE Masters this week. And that is, of course, Alienware. All of our pros are playing on the Aurora Ryzen 10 PCs here this weekend. You can get your hands on the exact same gear that our pros are playing on, as well as following Alienware on Twitter and Instagram. Oh, I got to get better at this. At Alienware, I was down there. Make sure to shout them out on that social media. Grab yourself some sweet Alienware gear. So thanks to Alienware, as always, for powering us here in the SPL. My name's Dolson. It's still me, but we have replaced Mifflin with maybe an upgrade. Ro is here with me now. We've brought you on into studio. You nodded yes. You think an upgrade?
Yeah, first of all, definitely an upgrade. That's without a doubt.
Well, the fact that you're willing to play ball with any of my bits is already an immediate upgrade over Miff. He just stonewalls me every time, never jokes around with me.
That's a talent in itself, but I'll get there.
What, dealing with me and my bits?
Yeah,
stonewalling? Yeah, eventually.
Well,
by the end of the week, we're going to have you on the cast, and you're not going to be playing ball with any of my stuff.
That's right.
But for now, we've gotten one match in, and it's always, I wouldn't say difficult, but it's hard to glean too much from just the individual matchup. You have teams and their play styles, or do you think you actually might get a decent read on the style of game we're seeing from the one match?
Not necessarily, but I mean, I'm definitely surprised to see a fourth-place team beat a first-place team. Does that say anything about the European region versus the North American region and how they can adjust, or is that just, Gladiators, for example, being a strong team in a new meta at play-ins, and again being a strong team in a new meta at this LAN as well?
Well, we've got another EU versus NA matchup here. Of course, the Kaolin Wardens, that is the 3rd seed coming out of NA. And then the Highland Ravens, who is the 2nd seed coming out of EU. So I want to pick up right there before we actually sink our teeth into these rosters here, Ro. And again, we'll add one team up there to play against the Gilded Gladiators, one team down low on the loser side to play against the Eldritch Hounds in an elimination match later on today, depending on how this one goes. A little emphasis there at the end of your statement about EU versus NA.
Yeah.
In this current meta, do you imagine one play style would be stronger than the other, the kind of in-your-face run-it-down of North America versus the cool, calm, and collected of EU?
I think a couple months ago I would have an answer for that, but more, I think they've kind of switched. I've seen North America slow down a bit and Europe speed up. And,
sure.
So I'm kind of confused at where they're at right now. And then all of a sudden we've got a new meta as well, so they get to be creative in their own right.
Well, and we talked to Alpha, the coach of the Gladiators, in the post-game interview, and he mentioned that any player on that team in any sort of meta can step up and play an important role, depending on what role is strong at the moment. The Kaolin Wardens, a team that have a lot of strong role players, but centered and talked about a lot with this team is Sino and Moswall, of course, for good reason. Do you still think the jungle right now, Ro, is at a spot where Sino can still have a big impact on these matches?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was watching a lot of Twitch streams last night, and since the patch dropped as well, and Sino's been playing a lot. I've seen him still running things like a Bracken jungle and being these bursty Guardians, which people wouldn't have expected given the meta change, but he's still making it work. So I think if anybody's going to make something, off meta work today, it's probably him. And at the same time, Moswell usually comes out with pretty interesting picks. And I suppose his biggest victory was when he won Worlds on those majors like Alposh and stuff like that. I think those will definitely still be good. We just saw Merlin did great in that game. So, I think eyes are on mostly the mid lane jungle mid lane matchup.
Should be here for this Kaolin Wardens team. Has been a lot of Merlin for Moswall in their last few matchups. But there's also some strong points outside of just Sino and Moswall here on this team. And I want to look towards the duo lanes, Gino and Griff, for the Kaolin Wardens, especially in a meta where Hunter is so strong right now, Ro. Does Griff strike you as the type of player that can kind of carry that weight? Do you think Griff and maybe Gino getting off to a good start in the dual lane is a viable option for this Wardens team?
I mean, he certainly has his potential, I think, Griff on his own. But then with Gino, who's been traditionally a quite aggressive support, could make something happen in the dual lane. In the dual lane now, these waves are sticking around longer. They're tankier. And I think when waves are around, people just feel more confident to fight the enemy.
Yep.
So I think we'll see a decent amount of 2v2 in that lane as well.
I hope so, because the 2v2 that we could see is up against Silenced and Vaporish Coast for the Highland Ravens. And you talk about a duo lane, or a team rather, that is centered around a Hunter and a duo lane. It feels like that's where this Highland Ravens team has been throughout the EU SEC. Of course, the rest of this roster so strong and talented between Rapio in the jungle, Sap in the mid lane, Lomogao over in solo, a lot of eclectic picks there. But it always feels like it runs down to Vaporish Coast, getting that Heimdall pick and making something happen later on in these fights. And so, Ro, do you think it is obviously it's good, right? If you're in a meta where hunters are good,
For sure.
you want to have a very talented hunter player on your team.
Which they do.
That's got to be something, though, that the Wardens come into this matchup realizing. You've got to put a little emphasis maybe on Coast and picks and bans.
Yeah, so, well, is it that, or do we try to shut him down in the early game
down, sure.
and play really aggressive, for example? But as well, I'm looking at Mogao. You know, I think he's like you said, very eclectic picks, and that's what the Soul Lane has opened itself up to now as well. You know, we saw a Baron first pick in the last set. I thought that was going to go towards Soul Lane, and if there's a Baron first pick for Ravens in this game, I would definitely think it's going to go towards Soul Lane. So I think he has the potential to, you know, really flex the things that he's been working on in a meta that maybe fits him now more than ever.
Yeah, we have seen 4 straight Baron Somdi picks for
That's
Lomogao
right.
out of the solo lane. Very, very strong option for the Highland Ravens. And then Sap has thrown a couple of curveballs out there. He's really leaned into, in the last couple of matches, at least that this team has played, the Hells, Tiamat's still been strong, Aphrodite. Do you imagine we see a continued emphasis towards the healing style of mid laners in a matchup like this, especially when you got Sap, who likes to play those styles of picks?
Yeah, I mean, I think longer games, longer fights now do tend to make healing better. But again, it's pretty easy to ban out some of the best healing gods. So I think you might
do
have
it
to
anyway.
I think you might have to get a bit creative, and we'll see because, you know, this team, both teams actually in this match have been creative in general. And
Right.
I think when there's a new meta, it's all about who can break the game first. You know, who can like show the cracks in the meta and get away with, you know, being the first to the finish line in that term. You know, and then everyone else can follow suit.
Right.
Follow suit.
The Highland Ravens come into this matchup on a 4 individual game win streak and come in with some wind in their sails, as I said earlier on today. If you're the Kaolin Wardens, I hinted at potentially, you know, maybe banning out Vaporish Coast. How do you deal with a Heimdall? I think because with not many players, you can look at a pick that they constantly go to every single time if it's left open. Are you challenging Coast here in a best of one? Are you leaving the Heimdall open if you're the Kaolin Wardens?
I think I would just take the risk, and in my personal opinion, I would say, you know, I don't know if Heim is actually as good now as he was before, because I think, you know, steroids on Hunters now are much better, get that attack speed, crit a lot. Then again, Heimdall can do some big number crits, so maybe he'll still just go for it and run it anyway. I don't think he synergizes the best with Devo's gloves. I think he was better with Trans, which has fallen out of the meta a little bit now. So we'll see if he still values it. If he does, then it is difficult to punish him in lane.
Now, we do. It is worth mentioning, one, that Coast, when Heimdall is banned, still has some very good games. Went 12-0 on Jingwei, 6-0 on Ho Yi in the last couple of games when Heimdall was either taken away or not picked by this Ravens team. So it's not like a one trick here with just Heimdall. And also worth mentioning, with neither of these two teams making it into studio, we were on North American servers, so there could be, maybe there is, a slight advantage to the Wardens here playing on servers closer to where they'll be playing from. Not that we want to harp on that too much, Ro. How much of an emphasis do you think something like that plays? And I mean, it's a best of one. You got to put your best foot forward in game one. I imagine the Ravens, though, aren't going to let that factor into their mentality too much.
No, and I think they've already been working on it. I know I've seen Vaporish Coast on NA servers playing ranked from home and already practicing
still winning.
For the last couple of weeks. Yeah, and still doing really well. I mean, he plays things like Tier, which are traditionally not easy on high ping because it's not easy to hit them. He's playing a Hunter, and that's his main role, and that is typically difficult to play on high ping, but he's had the practice, so he's taking it seriously. They're certainly not saying, you know, we've got a disadvantage, I give up. Not at all. They're coming here and giving their best foot.
You got to do that. And I want to flip a little bit here because we've talked about how the Wardens may put some emphasis on Vaporish Coast and picks and bans. Could you do that? Do you leave Heimdall open? I look at Sino on the other side as someone who raises similar questions, but for a different reason, where it feels like Sino, who knows what he's playing at any given time. Lomogao for the Ravens, a similar mindset to that. At what point do you just not bother banning out a specific player who can play a little bit of everything? We've seen Osiris, Eset, Shiva, Kabrakan has been strong for Sino, and we've already seen a variety in 2 different jungle picks earlier on today. How much emphasis do you think the Ravens want to put towards Sino going into game one?
For me, I mean, if I was to take a coach perspective on that,
Right,
he's
coach
just
perspective.
he's just a kind of a question mark. You know, I'm not sure if he knows what he's going to play until like he's almost
figures
loading
it
in.
out.
Yeah. But he's certainly got a long roster of guards that he can play, and if
Right.
he can find something that's right for the scenario and right for the new meta that we're going into, then he could be the guy to watch.
Because what did we see? We saw Erlang Shen and Set in
Yeah.
game/set number 1, I suppose. Auto attack style junglers, chin size being so strong. Is that the trend you're starting to pick up on in the jungle?
Yeah, well, I mean, so far from that
So
game,
far, yes,
yeah. If
but
we take it
from what you've seen in
in
9.5.
ranked, I've seen a bit of everything. I've
Yeah.
seen hunters, like I said before. I've seen Sino playing Kabrakan. I've seen mages.
Seen hunters in the jungle?
Yeah. I've seen 5 hunters on a team.
Are they that
so
good?
Apparently. I guess we'll find out.
I guess we'll see. Hunters in the jungle, wouldn't have expected that, but part of me now hopes that we do end up seeing something out of the jungle. I think Soul Lane ends up being a very important matchup here in this set as well, Ro, because we've mentioned Lamogao. It's been a lot of Baron for Lamogao recently, but outside of the last 4 games has been a healthy variety of picks for Lamogao. Relentless one, very similar, but a little bit more diversity in the last 6 games. Been a few Cthulhu games, Guan Yu, Bologna, things like that. In general, do you think solo lane's in a strong spot right now? We've seen some groaning from solo laners.
Look,
What style of role are they playing at the moment? Hoping that you can survive against Hunter seems to be maybe priority one.
yeah, I think you just take more of a utility role. Like the last game we saw, Hercules was the one pulling and pushing. It was some
Right.
of the only CC on the team comp apart from Yamoja, right? And so he was setting up his carries. You play that utility role. You play around your carries because hunters are so strong. At least that's what everybody's saying. And you kind of just, they are the president in your Secret Service, basically. You do everything for them, you know.
Right.
And you said, he's played Baron the last 4 times, and that might hurt him because that's an easy ban. Baron's now a very good god, and then, well, he's already played it a bunch. Let's ban it.
Well, the good news is, Ro, we get to stop speculating on who's banning out Coast. Are we banning out Sino? What do we do with Baron? Because picks and bans for game 1 of 1, starting right now between the Ravens and the Wardens. Of course, these two teams playing from their respective homes. And so you'll stick with us in studio a little bit longer here. Kleedna continues to get banned out, Ro. That is something that has not changed from the SPL games we saw in 9.4 to 9.5 now.
Nope.
Still very strong. And that feels like a Maswal ban there, the AMC getting taken away. We saw Maswal highlight that style of Hunter build, I suppose, still pretty strong.
Yeah, still one of the best hunters in the mid lane as well. I think he fits that role very well. And if hunters are good, then he's got to be top tier in that regard as well. There's the Bracken that I was talking about. I'm not sure if they were listening or watching the same ranked games that I was.
Definitely were, yeah.
Yeah.
You're giving it away. You're still doing some coaching, even despite being on the desk here with me. Yeah, Kabrakan gets taken away. And then a couple of support bans up against the Ravens. So you take away a Yamoja and a Khepri here. Yamoja seems pretty strong in the right hands, and of course support for the Ravens, not a weak point. Khepri ban, does that make some sense to you here in the first 3?
Yeah, again, one of the best Secret Service type characters. If you want anything protecting your carries, it's probably Emoja, it's probably Khepri. We saw Nox being high value, and then a Jingwei who doesn't need much protection is first pick. So I think that's a smart pick, especially if you're playing, that kind of late game-esque team comp, which we'll see if they go into that. But Hades and a Geb on the other side is being hovered at least.
All right, so we pivot away from the Hades.
There we go.
Ends up going to Yorm. So for a little while, actually, we heard rumblings that Yorm might be the new age in the solo lane. We saw some Jormungandr, didn't end up taking over the SPL or the SEC like we thought it might. But some of the players in the solo lane who still like some of those more unique style of picks will lean towards this. What does a Yorm Geb 1-2 give you here if you're the Ravens?
Well, I can tell you a fair bit about Yorm. I've played him
Please
a little bit in my time. He definitely has the clear that you need now. He does sometimes struggle against hunters, so it is surprising to see him. Then again, he could be one of the better gods with thorns, so he might just land in front of a hunter and slam a thorns and hope for the best. I've traded my life for a good amount of damage. Hopefully my jungler can do the rest. And also he might just be diving with the Geb shield as well. So.
Right. Yeah, and I looked at it, and Yorm always makes me think of Cthulhu, and I already mentioned Cthulhu a little bit. Do we think Cthulhu's just out of the meta right now because of the prevalence of chin size and hunters being so strong? You think he might sneak his way in at all this weekend, or are we not seeing him?
It's more his wave clear is his problem.
Yeah.
He doesn't have great wave clear. He never did. Last meta, he got away with it. You could kind of give up some of your blue buffs, for not having wave pressure and just scale into the late game. I'm sure he's still a late game god and is still great in the late game. He heals a lot, which people are surprised by, but he's not going to be able to clear the waves these days. So I think if somebody does pick him, he's just going to lose a lot of gold to either the tower or losing his blue buffs.
Now, Ro, I was wondering if we'd see a more unique style of pick from Sino, or we were sticking with something in the assassin tree that's a little bit more standard. Ends up being a Nemesis here, and then an Atlas in what we will assume to be support here for the Wardens. Atlas plus Jingwei in the duo lane. Do you like those two paired together?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anybody that's going to get on this Jingwei right now. You might have an Ula jumping in lane, but I don't think a Geb is going to help him much in terms of pressure. So I think Atlas and Jingwei are just going to kind of cruise through that lane and scale into the mid-late game team fights where they're strongest.
Cthulhu does end up taking a ban here. Maybe is able to farm up a little bit against the Yorm. Daji, though, gets taken away now by the Warden, still needing some setup and initiation. Maybe are the Ravens here going to take away that Daji. Uller is been in an interesting spot where the Transcendent style of Hunter builds were strong in the SPL, and we saw the double ability-based Hunters, things like that. With health pools being the way they are, that ability style of build, I mean, we've mentioned chin size for Hunters here recently. If you're looking towards ability style build, we mentioned it a little bit with AMC. Do you still think there's enough shred there with an Uller to take down some of these tankier targets?
I think there's enough. They're not going to be the best on the team compared to a traditional Hunter at taking down a tank, but you know, a build like Transcendence into, for example, hi-rez, maybe even fail not so you can crit. They have pen on it. They have crit. You know, you can still do that big burst damage. But I think Uller's probably going to be more suited for mid here, and maybe that explains a bit why they picked up the Jormungandr. They had to get their magical damage somewhere, so they put it in the solo lane, and maybe we'll get a second Hunter here.
Good point. Could see a little extra shred from the Ravens as mid does take a ban from the Kaolin Wardens. Tiamat taken off the table, but how about a Bakasura hero? I did not expect to see it maybe this week at all, but especially not in game number 2. What does Bakasura give you?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad pick, but I don't see a great matchup for Bakasura into a Nemesis here, for example. There's nothing to CC that shield away, so the Nemesis is going to get full value of that shield against that Bakasura and should be able to outbox him.
What's going on now? Vulcan gets picked up, and this will be the Moswell pick for the Kaolin Wardens. Amaterasu for the solo lane and Relentless One. Vulcan was always, even over the last couple of years, felt like a pick where it's a unique moment. You build Doom Orb and you can't catch them. Is Vulcan a little bit more viable now in your mind than maybe days have passed?
Maybe. I think he's going to still struggle against a pick like Bakasura. I think he's very good into Uller. If you think you're about to get axed, you throw that turret down in front of you and you can absorb that axe and you'll be fine. He does have to be a little bit worried about a Jormungandr who can't really get peeled from him. Then again, if a Jormungandr is diving, he has a Nemesis ult to back him up, so he's fine. But in general, Vulcan is just that's a Moswell pick. And if you were to round out that combo together, they have a very good objective damage with the Amaterasu, Stim, and then the Vulcan turret just DPSing the whole time.
I was wondering, or we were wondering rather, if Uller would end up landing in the mid lane, or if we saw more of a traditional mid lane pick. Raijin is about as mage gets, except for maybe something like a Merlin. And Raijin is the 10th and final pick here for the Highland Ravens. Do you like the way that they round out their draft here with the Raijin? Feels like a do-it-all pick, some safety, some range damage. Does it slot into this comp in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, you said it is a do-it-all pick. I'm surprised not to see more Hunters for all these players that were all talking about Hunters over the last couple of weeks, and then here they are just picking traditional mages in mid. It's quite funny. It
is funny. Raijin could be a good way to finalize the draft here for the Ravens. Amaterasu up against a Jormungandr could be interesting, and solo laners again have done some groaning. How does that matchup in your mind go there in solo? Do you expect much to be happening there in this matchup?
Well, I think Amaterasu's had some of her items be nerfed recently, whereas Jormungandr hasn't. So I think it kind of depends what kind of build Mogar decides to go on the Jormungandr, and if he decides to go something like a Gilded Arrow and get a good amount of clear. I think regardless, he'll have a good amount of poke on that Amaterasu. The Amaterasu will be able to heal it up. And I think the ideal situation for the Amaterasu is that he's able to just clear the waves and then go in and clear some jungle and just try to outfarm and outscale.
How important do you think it is for the Wardens to keep this Bakasura behind? You talk about late game hyper carries, Kalis, things like that. Are the Wardens going to be feeling pressure the longer this game goes on?
I think no matter what, he's going to get a small lead just because he farms so well. He just, runs through the jungle so fast and eats everything. Yeah. So just be ready for his engage. I think if they have good comms and good tracking of that jungle, as long as he doesn't get a great engage like flanking the Vulcan, for example, he shouldn't be able to get too much done on his own because a Jingwei should be able to get away.
Right.
It's just the Vulcan that is really vulnerable. But if an Atlas can play around him, that Atlas movement speed plus the Vulcan movement speed might be enough to get away from a Bakasura, but we'll have to see.
On the flip side, do you think Sino's going to have a difficult time finding these priority targets? Do you think Ullr's safe enough with a Geb? Do you think Raijin, the Thunder Crash Away, is safe enough? Is it a farm style of game in your mind for Sino here early on with his gank options?
It might be. We might see a Golden Blade and he'll keep up with that Bakasura as best he can. I think Raijin is probably his easiest target depending where Geb is. He can definitely chase down either Raijin or an Ulla, or he can just kind of sit back and wait for them to engage and Nemesis ult the first target to come in.
Now, the difficult question always is, as an analyst, Ro, you got to zoom out a little bit. Is there just one comp that you like better? If you're the head coach of a team, you're drafting your team through picks and bans, are you feeling more comfortable if your team got one of these two over the other?
Look, Mifflin came into the green room after last game and asked me the same question, and I gave a very wrong answer apparently because I thought Hounds were going to win by far and away, and I was wrong. I think I might have to go with Europe again.
All right, you're up for Ro here in game number 1, Wardens versus Ravens.
Thanks, Dave. It is going to be me, BlazyBard, joined by the wonderful Discount Ro here. Mifflin, how are you feeling about being over this side of the broadcast this time around?
Casting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm no stranger to this. I've done it a couple of times. A couple of years now, I think, of tenure under my belt.
Wow, that's a surprisingly long amount of time. Mifflin, we've got a whole bunch of, I would say new picks here, but there are a lot of things that are kind of unfamiliar or bringing in back in this patch coming into this game. So what kind of things are you looking at so far?
Immediately, my eye does go towards the Jormungandr. It's a pick that I've historically not endorsed. It's a pick that I'm not very used to seeing, and it's one that I think is limited in efficacy. But the European SEC has come out in droves to let me know that I am incorrect and that Jormungandr certainly has his value, and a 9.5, as Rose said, probably does get some intrinsic buffs as Warriors have kind of fallen off a little bit and Guardians have maintained their strength. But the main defense point of Jormungandr in the meta to me, that was given to me, this is a direct quote, is that he just gets Totem of Coup and he doesn't have to fight over it. Just sit in the lane, toss out the spit, slowly whittle away at that HP bar, and then eventually you can start to rotate towards some of these team fights. I think maybe the main strength for Jormungandr in my personal eyes is that mobility. So I am very curious to see whether or not he's going to be able to dive into that back line and survive. It's a sentiment that I'm echoing from Ro, in that Jormungandr has historically not been great against Hunters, and, well, this is a Hunter patch.
Well, I mean, but that being said, Ro covered this as well, but Hunters have been a big talking point for these teams, and yet here we are still in a 2-Hunter meta. Both teams only drafting one. We were talking in the green room about, Hunters maybe even coming into the solo lane this time around.
Yeah, I am surprised. I mean, there's just been so many rumblings about the relative strength of Hunters compared to the rest of the cast. I thought, if anything, we'd be seeing at least double Hunter compositions, maybe like triple Guardian, Jungle, Support, and Solo to facilitate that. But instead, a lot more standard, and this could be a byproduct of the fact that the patch is so recent. We don't really know exactly what's going to be that breakout style, who breaks the game first, as you and Ro have been saying, which I think is a very apt way to put it, very eloquently stated. But yeah, I am surprised. And even the mages that we have seen picked and or hovered, we saw an Opwash hover, Vulcan locked in, Raijin making a slight resurgence as well. Just things that I wasn't expecting to see. If I were expecting anything, things like Poseidon immediately jumped into my mind, which is something we saw in set 1. Or even just like consistent DPS dealers, which I suppose Vulcan could likely fit that style. And considering what Alpha had said during the post-game interview, and that macro play and objectives are how you win games in 9-5, well, Vulcan does a whole lot of that for you with the turret.
Absolutely, and when you basically have a pocket ADC as your second ability, I think
all the time.
Yeah, you got a lot of ability burst, and on top of that, Vulcan may be the longest range secure in the game. Like, I'm thinking maybe Thoth kind of breaks that as well.
Similar range.
Yeah, like you hit an Earthshaker, that's going to be a lot of distance damage that he can do to really try and make sure that the Kaolin Wardens can secure these objectives.
But it's not all daisies for Vulcan. He's got some matchups on the other side that could make it very difficult to perform, specifically that Bakasura. It just feels like anybody with a cripple makes it impossible for Vulcan to perform. Backfire, not allowed to be channeled when he's standing in a pool of this Bakasura's vomit come level 5. So I'm keeping my eyes on Rapio. Very interested to see his pacing.
Both of these Guardians just going aggressive onto the ADCs, making sure that they're not farming too much for free, but Gino actually taking a lot of poke from Vaporish. Meanwhile, Griff doesn't really have that same kind of early game presence that you can really pull out of an Ulla.
No, once he ticks over to level 2, Griff's going to have a little bit more, maybe explosive bolts in that slot to help out with that AoE. As we start to get closer to level 5 as well, I think the relative value of Jingwei and the explosive bolts with the itemization as it is might be able to match out some of that pressure. Ul is a pick that I thought we would see a lot less in this meta. He's just not that consistent auto attacker. He's not that kin size user that a lot of these other hunters are, and instead it's a burst style of pick, and well, everybody's just tankier now, so it's harder to find that burst.
For sure. I think when we were looking at picks and bans here, I think you and I both had the same thought of sorry, not Vaporish, but this Ulla is probably going to go into that different spot. But Rapio blinking here into the mid lane. Sino taking a little bit of damage, but as we've mentioned so many times before, 9.5, you don't get away with these kills as easily as that.
No, it's going to take a little while. Both Bakasura and Nemesis are going to be slightly more mid-game slanted. It's just about poke as of now, and a good amount of poke immediately from Oswald. Decent pressure from the Kaolin Wardens. Seems as if they're very willing to play aggressive at this point, but I am concerned for their ability to actually hit Paydirt. I mean, killing a Bakasura or even killing a Raijin at this point, very difficult.
Vaporish is going to get picked up here by Gino, but some nice peel from Silence is going to make sure that Gino actually takes the worst half of that trade. Meanwhile, Rapio potentially looking to go for this red buff. This is a Bakasura, so I say potentially going for the red buff. In reality, there's basically no one in the game who's going to out-secure him on that.
No, Eat Minion is the best confirmation tool on the map right now, but it is not going to come without cost. Take a peek at your mini-map. Thought maybe we'd see Sino work his way towards the speed. Instead, has opted in for the red buff himself. So red trade here between these junglers. We'll see which one can pick up more. I'd probably hedge my bets towards Rapio, though. That's a Bakasura, and he's deep in the enemy jungle.
And he's going straight for that purple as well. Double whammy here for the Bakasura most likely. And, well, actually some Gino peel might help secure it, but nope. Rapio is going to be able to secure that one. Gino giving some chase. Potentially some damage here. Sino dashing in. Silence could be in a lot of trouble. That's a slice and dice, and down he falls for first blood.
That's easy for Sino. Great rotation. It's when you're going for those red buff trades, somehow it's actually Sino who confirms the objective a little bit sooner. Maybe that rotation from Gino slows down Rapio as he moves in towards the purple, and, well, Sino gets to the flank and very easily is able to finish off that kill. Credit does go over towards the ADC, so Griff on the Jingwei, who already has the opportunity to play incredibly safely, can do so with a little bit more ease going forward. But taking a peek at the build that Jingwei has gone for, Griff opting for the Gilded immediately into the Spike Gauntlet, likely going to be upgraded into the Devourer's Gauntlets. Doesn't say passive play to me. If he wanted to play passive, maybe we're talking about, like, I don't know, Hunter's Cow or Death Toll for sustain in lane. Instead, that's great damage output from Griff already in the build.
And, you know, on the flip side, we've got Vaporish here with the Bluestone, which, I mean, we mentioned already that the burst capability from this Ulla is already going to be diminished due to the amount of HP that is just on the board. So, do we think this, the trans build is still going to work out just as well for Vaporish in this kind of meta?
I am curious. Ro had brought this up as well. The fact that you can't move in towards kin size or look towards those standard tank shred builds with an Ul, but you could still pick up something like a Fail Not if you want to get some crit. You could look towards the hi-rez and help you out with some of that burst. I am curious. 9.5 still incredibly new, so I'm not exactly sure what the power curve of Ul looks like here, but my rule of thumb on current patches, if you are a burst style pick, you are probably just finding a little bit less value. That said, Ul with a lead is probably going to do Ul things regardless. As of now, no lead established, but that's Vaporish Coast, and he's instilled confidence in me.
Well, you say no lead established, but, you know, if we could take a look at the graphs here, already a bit of a gold lead starting to build in favor of the Kaolin Wardens here, with a little bit of an XP difference. You know, it's minuscule here, only about 200, but that's, you know, a level either way.
It is. Just a little bit of XP separating these two squads. Not often we get to see experience and gold separated, especially at this early portion of the game. might be a byproduct of all the golden blades already established for the Kaolin Wardens. Just a ton of farm for both Relentless One and Sino, as opposed to the one for Rapio, who's getting involved.
Gino could be in some trouble. The black ooze covers the ground. Gino can't dash away, but Griff with a nice little knock up there to make sure his support isn't going to get too heavily aggressed onto. I like the idea there from Gino, just try and harass Vaporish a little bit. Don't let him get his purple buff for, you know, too much free.
Yeah, I think supports are allowed to play with that level of abandon, especially in 9.5. You are allowed to play aggressively in the enemy jungle. You're allowed to face check these buffs alone because of that additional survivability afforded to you throughout the early portions. And that is a heavy commitment at that from Rapio, who does, he blinks in, loses out on that relic for the next 100 seconds, as well as uses his ultimate. I mean, Bakasura not going to be too perturbed by that. Will still be able to farm the map very efficiently, but his effectiveness in team fights or in ganks is going to be largely mitigated for about another minute or so.
Just back to the neutral farm now for these two teams. Now, Mifflin, you know, basically all of these buffs are down. There isn't, I mean, I personally wouldn't say there's too much gank potential from either of these two junglers at the moment. So what's the game plan?
The game plan from here for both teams, probably slow down the pace. There's not much to fight over on the map. Neither squad going to feel overly confident in their ability to look towards early objectives. I think the first indicator of actual objective play is going to be when these solo laners start to rotate out. And if we're talking about solo lane rotations, despite Lamogao playing Jormungandr and having teleport available, I think he just gets outpaced by Relentless One on this Amaterasu.
Vaporish taking a little bit of damage here while trying to invade that Harpy. Not going to go his way. Griff's going to be able to secure that one up and head back over to his lane. Vaporish does eat a fair amount of damage, though.
He does. That is a large commitment, I suppose. Griff has just got great poke potential at this point, and we're starting to get to an inflection point in Griff's build, already moving in towards the Shuriken, where Wind Demon's starting to get looked at. You're going to get your crit chance online a lot earlier. Crit just great in a boxing match. And, well, Vaporish Coast still working on those Transcendence stacks. 17 on the Transcendence as opposed to the 50 already for Griff on this Devourer's Gauntlet. So sustain advantage over towards the Kaolin Wardens and potentially damage advantage as well once we see this next item.
3v3 squads are starting to form up here on the mid lane, potentially looking for a fight over those right Harpies, but Rapio doesn't really want to go in too far. Miff, let's talk about these mid laners here. They both started off with this Sands of Time and then branching into a movement speed item. The difference here being Sap's going for that Charon's coin, whereas Moswell's leaning more towards that Doom Orb. What's the discussion there?
Well, Doom Orb is just core on Vulcan, right? I mean, we are very used to seeing
Absolutely.
that. Additional mobility always going to be valuable, especially against damage over time style of picks, consistent damagers, and Rapio finds himself within that camp. If you're able to just outrun Regurgitate, you're able to backfire very easily and then disengage yourself. Similar methodologies between these two, but one gets a percent pen early.
Gino and Silence both taking a lot of damage. There's going to be the Earthshaker taking Silence down to half. Vaporish also taking a large chunk of his health bar, but look at the wraparound from Relentless One here. Going to be stunning out Vaporish and, well, going to stun out his life bar as well. The grayscale screen is what he's going to be seeing for the next 20 seconds. Meanwhile, the Kaolin Wardens have a basically opened Gold Fury here, silenced and Sap, potentially looking to come back around for some contention, but it's too little, too late.
Yeah, no way the Highland Ravens could stick around. Lamogao may have bit off more than he could chew. Would have to go to that World Serpent to disengage. Throws out a little bit of damage on his way, but make no mistake, he is not sticking around in this fight. 2 kills now to the Kaolin Wardens off of great rotations, and it's as if we had written a script for it, man. I mean, Soul Landers rotate, Gold Fury goes down. Relentless One, though, finds much more value on his rotation. It was the initiation from the Kaolin Wardens that forces out the evasive maneuvers from the Highland Ravens, and essentially the Wardens act as sheepdogs and force them into Relentless One. Just phenomenal ultimate from this Amaterasu. Separate the fight, fall back, go towards the objective. Just clean, clinical Smite play.
I do want to talk about the Amaterasu's build here, Mifflin. There's almost a little bit of a identity question. Like, you've got this Death's Toll to start with, matched with the Golden Blade, then moving into some defense here in the Shogun's Kusari. Are we expecting Relentless One to further commit into this kind of supportive playstyle, or...?
Maybe a little bit more bruiser, or maybe a bit of aggression as Lamogao caught inside the tower.
I was not expecting that much damage to come through onto the Snake. A lot of ultimates expended for it, though, and now Sino is able to make it out of the tower. Rapio not really wanting to commit here, but that's going to be 3 ultimates for Lamogao.
It is, but that's a great commitment. There's nothing you can do on the opposite side of the map, but there is something you can do in Lamogau's lane, and that's the Pyromancer pulled out very quickly by the Kaolin Wardens. Eye silenced, very nearly able to take that with the Shockwave, but is unsuccessful this time around. Every single kill goes to North America. Every single objective does the exact same. Trebuchet working its way down mid, and you got to think the Order side feeling confident with their 4,000 gold lead.
And I think that's a really smart move from the Kaolin Wardens, right? They acknowledge that they've got this Trebuchet pushing down the mid lane. They then go, all right, what can we do with this pressure in mid? Let's go to right lane, kill Mogao, and then while Sap is forced to sit in mid lane and deal with that Trebuchet, Pyromancer is just basically free at that point.
And here's the thing about Lamogao. He's going to be dying pretty consistently, I think. Take a peek at his build. I'm not seeing any defense. I'm seeing a Chronos Pendant immediately into an Enchanted Spear. This Jormungandr does damage. If he's able to close gap onto Maswal or Griff, could very easily force out some of their defensive relics or maybe an ultimate from Griff. But if he's caught out in a team fight, if he's going to have to act as an initiator for his team, he's just not going to survive very long. So maybe the conversation that Ro brings up on the desk that Jormungandr struggles against ADCs, Lamogau's answer is, well, I'll just kill him first or I'll die real quick anyway. Regardless, if it's a bad matchup, I might as well be putting out some sort of damage. That said, when you're 2 levels down and Relentless One's already moving in towards a pretty heavy bruiser style of build, looks like it could be a Berserker shield in that 3rd slot, it's going to make it pretty difficult for Lamogau to stick around.
Well, and also, you know, if we're talking about ADCs, right, we got to talk about the items that are making them so strong, and who else abuses those items really, really well? Cyno here on this Nemesis. And, you know, that's not necessarily a character that's going to be super easy for Mogao to take down. You know, outside of the knockups that he's got, he's going to really struggle to get through those shields.
He will. And, you know, I was curious to see what type of build we would see from Cyno. Nemesis, in my mind, is always at her strongest when she goes towards that standard mace tree, then moves in towards the Hydras, utilizing those auto cancels with the shield to just become a burst god. But I suppose now with consistent damage kind of reigning supreme in 9.5, auto attack junglers really are just head and shoulders above. So it's Stone Cutting Sword in the 2nd slot, can only assume it's going to be Kinsai's in that 3rd. That said, you're not getting the absolute most value from Kinsai's from Cyno because there aren't really any tanks on the side of Highland Raven as of right now. Eye Silence eventually will get some survivability behind him, but Sap 7, full damage style of build. Occasionally we'll see like guys like Paul go towards a Breastplate of Valor in the 3rd slot to help out a bit. Lamogao has essentially built 0 HP so far. So, I mean, Kinsai's good on its own, especially with the changes to HP pools, but maybe relegated or mitigated a bit in efficacy.
We could see that kind of augmented here. You know, Lamogao could surely go for some later game health items to
Gotta
try
hope.
and... I mean, you really do, because otherwise this guy is going to keep consistently getting, as you said, busted down every time he goes into these fights. And speaking of, the Highland Ravens potentially wanting to contest these Harpies here. Gino, the only one stepping up. Mogao is making the rotation over, and the grab from Gino not quite going to land. Silenced is going to be just fine. That's going to wash that one out.
You know, I'm looking at the levels now as well, and although gold has separated a fair bit because of the neutral objective play, experience is largely equal. Maybe 1 level, the largest disparity between any one of these roles. 1 in the jungle, 1 in the soul lane. So maybe speaks to the lack of confidence that we're seeing from Kaolin Wardens to commit to these fights. The Highland Ravens step up to those right side camps, and you think to yourself, well, 4,000 gold, 13 minutes in. You'd think this is a fight the Kaolin Wardens would be chomping at the bit to take. But the Highland Ravens are still very capable of taking these team fights. Take a peek at the build from Rapio as well. Odysseus Bow in the 2nd slot. Going to help out a whole lot with that attack speed. I think attack speed may be the most important stat line for Bakasura. The more auto attacks that you can use while Butcher Blades are channeled means the more true damage you're able to apply. Also, even going for Odysseus Bow, you're not even sacrificing that much power in your build as Butcher Blades, when you put points into that ability, you are passively building power. So I like what we've seen from Rapio, but no impact ultimates just yet.
It's going to be the Frenzy Pop for the Kaolin Wardens as they're going to
Ravens.
actually scratch that Cyno. Sorry, Vaporish steals it away. Now the counter-engage from the Highland Ravens is going to come through. Vaporish already forced to use both of his relics, and it's going to be Cyno, the first man down. Vaporish running for his life up the top here, and it looks like Mogao is going to help secure his way out. Sap 7, though, not so lucky. He's going to fall down to Griff. Now Silence getting getting pelted by these crossbow bolts. Griff already using the airstrike to go in. Moswell still doing some damage. Backfire's going to finish that one out.
Highland Ravens may have taken the objective, but it cost them 2, only answering in 1. Sino has 15 seconds of the grayscale to, maybe berate his team for dropping that objective, but what can the Wardens do with this time with 2 dead on the Ravens? Maybe some mid-tower pressure, but again, these towers are so much stronger now at 9-5. It's going to be very difficult to see here. Maybe Coast can stop Griff.
Catches him in the air. No dash for him, but
Hello?
the damage isn't there. Griff is able to turn it around, and now Rapio
Hello?
jumping over the wall, not even able to get close to Griff before taking half of his health bar. And now Relentless charging in, still looking to do a little bit more damage. Doesn't look like the Kaolin Wardens are too interested in this tier 1, though. Scratch that. Griff and Gino are going to take that, while potentially the rest of the team goes over towards this Pyromancer.
Man, Griff just stands his ground. Not concerned with an axe in his face. Not concerned with Rapio jumping over the wall at him. And that's the strength of Silver Branch Blow, Wind Demon, already a full stack to devour his gauntlets. Nobody wants to line up against this Jingwei. And if you're going to wait, if you're going to just bide your time, maybe say, okay, well, the Highland Ravens look pretty good in a late game team fight. This Jingwei is only getting stronger and stronger. And now looking at Lamogau's build, going in towards that staff tree, could be a Gem of Isolation, could be a very late Warlocks, doubt it's that one. It's a little bit of HP stacked up, but even then, just not going to be very effective at creating space for his team. Griff might just go unmitigated in some of these team fights. I am concerned for the Highland Ravens, but they've got answers. Maybe Rapio has to be that dedicated diver. He doesn't win the engagement, but by nature of Bakasura's kit, being able to spawn up those minions and block maybe a couple auto attacks from Griff might be enough for him to take that 1v1. Because looking at the rest of the draft, who's doing it for the Ravens? I'm not sure that they have any other answers.
Absolutely, and it's a discussion point we've talked on a few times, Mifflin, but just looking at the damage trading there in the middle lane from Vaporish and Griff, Vaporish, for all intents and purposes, has Griff dead to rights. He catches him in the air, forces the beads. There's a whole half second there where Vaporish could have done his damage, but it just didn't come out, and then Griff turns around, hits him with, 3 auto attacks, and suddenly Vaporish isn't looking so healthy anymore.
Yeah, 3 auto attacks, 2 crits. I mean,
sorry.
Griff got a little bit lucky, I suppose. It's not the highest amount of crit chance at this point, and I'm sure Vaporish Coast probably mumbling something to the same effect to the rest of his team. Kaolin Wardens now grouped up on the map. Seems like undeterred by that Gold Fury steal, still want to maintain aggressive posturing deep in the Raven side. Not much to fight over as of right now. 17.5 minutes in, we're starting to approach the point of the game where Fire Giant can become the topic of conversation. If anybody gets picked in the next couple of moments, you better believe that's where either one of these teams would love to put their attention. One squad with a Bakasura on the map should be able to shred it pretty quickly, but I think you gotta give credit over to the Kaolin Wardens. Their objective shred is just by and large far ahead of what the Highland Ravens can do. Just moments or seconds left alone with these objectives, and they'll remove them from the map. You've got crit on your ADC, your jungler has gone a full auto attack style, isn't actually the kin size that, as I had hypothesized, instead the Executioner. Maybe Sino taking similar note, realizing that Lamogau is just straight up not a tank.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is something that I was about to touch on as well. Maybe a response to, as we were mentioning earlier, just the lack of pure HP. Now even moving into the Winged Blade. And I really like this pickup. It's a lot of movement speed, it's a lot of attack speed, it's some extra HP for Sino as well, which, there aren't many tanks on the enemy team, but you then have to worry about the extra burst potential coming from Mogao. And I really like the idea to counter that by just going, I'm just going to be healthier.
Yeah, have a little bit of HP infusion from Winged Blade, get yourself some movement speed, get yourself some magic defense, but most importantly, it's the slow immunity. Lamogao, Rapio, Sap7, even Eye Silence, all have got slows in their kit, which means that you're just getting a whole lot of value from this Winged Blade and getting a movement speed boost anytime you take an engagement. I heard you ooh and ah about the HP trade there, and sure, Griff falls low, but take another peek at Griff's HP. Already back to 90%, and who's forced back to base? It's Vaporish Coast. Only one of these hunters has sustain, and, well, that's the Jingwei.
Yeah, and, even if Griff didn't have the sustain, he still wins out in that fight, right? Because when Vaporish has to back, he has to walk the whole way. Griff's got 2 little wings on his back there that he can use to basically get halfway into that lane for absolute free. And now looking at Silenced, he could potentially be in some rough waters here. Gets picked up, and he's got 3 people right next to him. A huge Cataclysm But with the ultimate from Nemesis, I'm not sure it's going to matter. The roll away, it's going to save him for now, though. But Rapio's getting turned on. There's the damage from Moswell to finish off that one. SAP7 in some difficulties. Gino able to force out that jump, but there's going to be the beat and Aegis to stop him from getting picked up. Sino could be in some trouble, but Sap falling up in that top line. Mogao charging up into the top lane to try and help out Vaporish, who is under this tier 1 tower all by himself against 5 people. Sino blinking forward, but a beautiful axe to stop him up. Jumps over the wall. Griff is there to say hello. Moswell does fall down to the Geb, though, but Vaporish is in trade.
Gino and Relentless One still keeping up pressure. Lamogao low HP and no defense to his name. Might be able to stealth his way out. He's lined up against Griff, so you better believe his HP is going to vanish immediately. Griff puts down a double, and now the Kaolin Wardens can fall back and look towards the objective. Only one member of the Highland Ravens still alive, and it's Eye Silence. What can a Geb do on his own? Well, maybe a Miracle Shockwave.
No Cataclysm available for him, and it looks like the Kaolin Wardens don't want to leave anything to chance. They're going to force Silence away. That is a huge cooldown. I think Silence should get this death here. Sino should be able to just chew through that. One more auto should do it. Goodbye, Mr. Geb.
Yeah, that's an easy pickup for Sino. Silence, I suppose, has to make that rotation in. It is incredibly low odds, but considering the synced up respawn timers of the Highland Ravens, he realizes Eye Silence, that even should he fall, the rest of his team should respawn in time to put up a defense around the Fire Giant if the Kaolin Wardens so choose. So he decides to take the low odds, high reward play of attempting to steal away the Gold Fury. Eventually does cost his life, and he does not steal the objective, so only makes the Kaolin Wardens that much stronger. But the Ravens should be here in time. Rapio, he knows, it's pulled.
The Wardens want to go straight onto this objective. Gino already peeling out, and it's going to fall down before even the Earthshaker connects. That is a free Fire Giant for this team. That is already 8,000 gold in the lead, and Mifflin, we've talked about, before the amount of gold that Fire Giant equivalates to, and I'm looking on the map right now, I'm seeing so many towers for the Wardens to pick up.
And we are still very early into this game, only 22 minutes in, so every bit of gold and experience still matters. We're still waiting for 6 slots. We're still waiting for some of these guys to tick over to level 20. What can the Highland Ravens do to mitigate these losses, though? And I think Vaporish Coast has found perhaps the best answer that he could, which is taking down a tier 2, but at what cost?
He might fall down here. Relentless One, actually, Vaporish is going to try and taunt him out there, but the Phoenix is getting pressured by the rest of the team. Looks like the Wardens aren't too comfortable pushing into this one this time around, though. So they're going to take what they've got, which is a Fire Giant and 2 towers. Still a pretty decent horde. Back, finish up some of these items, and then I would not be surprised to see them do the same thing down the left lane and pick up that most valuable Phoenix there.
Yeah, Kaolin Warden's game plan is essentially written in stone. There are many options, I suppose. You could do just about anything that you want, but if we're going to go by traditional Smite knowledge, working through the rest of these towers and then maybe approaching a Phoenix if they can find a pick is going to be the answer. That said, in 9-5, towers and Phoenixes are much stronger, much higher percent penetration, great base damage increase as well. So the Highland Ravens, although very far down, not completely out just yet. That said, we've added a couple of mechanics to the game that make it a little bit easier to siege, even though these towers are stronger. And a Trebuchet on the left lane, well, that's going to make it easy, and that's exactly where the Kaolin Wardens would love to have it.
Absolutely, and look at the split here, Mifflin. We've got 3 and then 2 on the left-hand side. This is, well, I would say pretty classic. Classically, you see that 4-1 split with the jungler in the secondary lane, but this time around, these tanks wanting to show some presence in the mid lane. Sino actually going aggressive here onto Sap, already expends the ultimate. Beads use as well here, and look at the amount of damage he's put out to Silence. There's the ultimate from Relentless One, trying to potentially pick up that kill. Silenced rolls away, and they do force the ult from Lamogao. That is 2 ults for just Mogao's ult here. Actually, scratch that. I didn't notice the Cataclysm coming through. That is a big cooldown coming into this Phoenix.
Yeah, Highland Ravens essentially got no initiation for themselves now and no HP to work with either. SAP7 dropped low.
There's the Frenzy, and already the Birds at half HP. Vaporish gets knocked up, and there's the Earthshaker. No one gets hit by it, but the space it creates is going to give the Wardens enough time to pick up the Phoenix and make their way back to mid lane.
Yeah, not often a jungler, especially a Nemesis, is allowed to essentially fight between a tier 2 and a Phoenix on her own, force out multiple high resource abilities, even takes the relic away from Eye Silence. That Cataclysm still not back up. SAP7 loses out on his own ultimate. The Highland Ravens, they don't have a whole lot left in the tank.
Vaporish is the target. Scratch that. It's Silence getting thrown back into the team, already instantly down to half HP. Just about slips around the back, but Relentless One could be in some form of distress here. Gets hit by the axe, and
Okay.
that's going to be the first kill for Sap7 to mount this defense. I think the best play for the actually scratch that. Vaporish gets instantly deleted there. Moswald does too much damage.
Yeah, this Vulcan is not one to be scoffed at. Now the Kaolin Wardens in a 4v4 would like to reinitiate in the Phoenix.
Oh my god, Morgau gets deleted! Griff and the rest of his team combine to pick up the World Serpent. And now in this 3v4 situation, Mifflin, there's a little bit of health missing from two of these players on the Kaolin Wardens, but it's Griff and Moswald that are still 100%, and that Fire Giant is still ticking away, making sure they have health to spare. Silenced is going to get shredded by that ultimate, but already the Phoenix at half HP.
Now with the minion wave in, it's going to be that much easier. Fire Giant, only 10 seconds
There
left
it
on
is.
the buff. The Highland Ravens will not commit themselves to this fight, rightfully so. Not sure how much recourse they had there. The Kaolin Wardens happy with their bounty. Take away the left Phoenix, the center Phoenix, and now can reset themselves back to base and spend up all that gold that they have accrued. Gino may have passed poorly there. Thought maybe we'd see Rapio reinitiate himself. And speaking of Rapio, just been a quiet game from this Bakasura. We even saw essentially a 4-man ultimate on that Phoenix defense, but the damage output just was not quite there. It's a slightly unorthodox style of build. Toxic Blade in 4th slot, Odysseus Bow in 2nd slot. Does not have the most damage output at this point, and even with Protector of the Jungle, fighting in lane, you're not really benefiting from that a whole lot either. So the Highland Ravens jungler just has been largely mitigated in what he's been capable of putting out in some of these team fights, whereas Moswald's essentially gone untouched, only 1 death for him, and the damage output should be something I think the Highland Ravens would be concerned about, and likely will be in this next team fight. Would be surprised if anyone besides Moswald was the target of aggression of the Ravens. That said, I don't think the Ravens can step this far out of base. This Fire Giant may as well be a foregone conclusion. Instead, play around your Phoenix. That's the only thing that separated the Ravens from a clean wipe in the last team fight.
And we saw, you know, just barely able to pick up 1 kill that last time around, but the Ravens are looking like they
stepping
want
up.
to try and push this, but it's a little bit late. They've already pushed up a lot, though. Silence, no movement ability available to him. Relentless One uses that ultimate in the backline. Here comes Rapio doing some damage to the carries, but the damage is going to get
Yikes.
right back given to him. Meanwhile, Sap7 just chewed through by Relentless One. Silence taken down as well. Vaporish should be the next POI, and though the beads are popped, it's not going to save his life. Only 2 men left standing, back down to 1. Only the Bakasura, and check the right lane, ladies and gentlemen, because that is where Rapio is. None of the Ravens are here to defend their Titan, and that is going to put Kaolin Wardens through to the winner's side of the bracket.
That's just a clean performance from the Kaolin Wardens, who established the pace very early on in this game and never let off the gas. Early objectives followed by further objectives, moving in towards early tower dodge as well. Thought we wouldn't get to see a whole lot of those in 9-5, but when you've got a lead like that as early as you did for the Kaolin Wardens, I think you could still expect to see some of those high-octane plays early on. I think I might chalk this one up entirely to composition diff, though. I mean, there was just not many counterplay mechanics. There weren't many comeback mechanics built into that draft for them, and well, the NA squad came out on top.
You know, we were talking about, you know, all throughout picks and bans, through the early game, we were talking this Bakasura could be a win condition if he was able to find some angles onto the Vulcan, but wasn't really able to play that card all that much. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for our best of 1 sets today. But moving forward, we'll have some best of 3s coming up very shortly.
I'ma make it mine tonight. I feel you breathing on you. You know that I'm a selfish lover. When it's mine, I want it. One track mind for you, for you. I'ma make you mine tonight. Pulling your hair, baby. I'ma make you mine tonight. I feel you breathing on you. You know that I'm a selfish lover. When it's mine, I want it. One track mind forever. For you. For you. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you need, baby. Tell me about your dreams. Tell me everything. Yeah. Do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. How is it over for me? My favorite toys, like my favorite space, oh yeah.
North America able to strike back in our second best of one of the day, and the Kaolin Wardens move on, send the Highland Ravens down to, I guess, the loser's best of three that we will have later on today. So we will still have two more EU versus NA matchups in our next two best of threes at least. The speedier of the two games that we've seen so far here today is the Kaolin Wardens don't look back, and they're able to roll over the Highland Ravens. My name's Dolson, and it is Ro with me once again. Ro, what did you see here at a high level? What gave the Wardens their win here, and what was their big advantage over the Ravens?
Pressure from minute one. Yeah, they just kind of held the W key, even when, Atlas was walking to the jungle by himself in the duo lane. We see him get ganked by a Bakasura. It doesn't matter, walks away.
Right.
Every time the Wardens get a trebuchet, which they got all of, every single one of them, they would activate it almost immediately. So they were not giving the Ravens any time to breathe at all. They were pulling Gold Fury at 9 minutes, which we didn't expect to see in this meta. They used the trebuchet in the left lane to immediately pull the Pyromancer as well.
Yep.
Just in general, not giving them room to breathe. That Amaterasu using her movement speed to rotate early, using the Shoguns to help them with the objective DPS, and basically just building an early lead and winning off of that.
And I'm glad that we saw the trebuchet have the impact that it did in this game, because I was just so curious, and we will see a lot more of it throughout the next couple of weeks, surely, how much of an impact those trebuchets would have. So it's kind of cool watching a team play around those, activating them immediately, things like that. Griff ends up being a big winner of maybe the current itemization in the Hunter role, as Jingwei absolutely slams here in game number one. And we talked a little bit about it in the green room. But Ro, you're maybe feeling like Jingwei could be one of the best hunters in the game right now.
Yeah, if anyone, much like myself, subscribes to PBM's tier list as basically the gospel, then Jingwei is the best god in the game.
Oh, did he put Jingwei up top?
Up top, yeah. And Baron was up there as well, which I also agree with. But
it was an overall tier list. It wasn't just a hunter tier list.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of hunters at the top, let me tell you that.
Right.
But yeah, Jingwei at the very top, and I think she just fits the meta perfectly. She's not by design an OP god or anything like that. It's just the meta has shifted to be much better for her playstyle in terms of scaling into the late game, playing these longer team fights which are auto attack oriented, not burst oriented, and then she's able to get all of her items online. She has a steroid, she has crit in her steroid as well. Her own escape, so she doesn't need the protection. She's basically all around exactly what you want. Her one weakness before was that she just didn't do much in laning phase, other than farm, and that doesn't matter much
That's
anymore.
all you're doing now anyway.
Even though they ended up having pressure and winning in that regard.
Right.
But still, so basically checks all the boxes for him.
Yeah, Griff goes 7-0-7 here in this game. The duo lane of the Wardens undying, a combined 8-0 and 21 for the Kaolin Wardens. Then only one death spread across the rest of Maswal, Sino, and Relentless One, or 3 deaths rather, spread across those 3. And I'm always curious, what Wardens team are we going to get? Because this Wardens squad was a bit of a slow starter, 3rd seed out of North America with so much talent on the roster. This is the best foot forward that they could have given. Now, I don't think we can ignore Ravens playing from Ping, North American servers for the EU squad. That's something you have to look at, absolutely. But I don't think that the Ravens will shy away from putting their best foot forward in the next best of 3. But the pressure now on for this Ravens team. You get one more best of 3, and the loser of that one is done on day number 1. So if you're now other teams here in this tournament, how worried are you about this Kaolin Wardens team? Because, again, I think during the regular season of the North American SVC, hard to know which team we were going to get. Do you think that showed you enough that this team is here to play?
It showed them that they're at least comfortable with this one play style, right? And it's only one game. That's all we get to see so far. But so far, they played this very objective-based, higher-pressure team comp that can build big gold leads and play through that. So I think if you're worried about them, then you start looking at that play style and either counter that play style or start to ban away some of the key gods like Amaterasu maybe or Jingwei, for example.
Yep.
So if the teams in the future need to do that, then they can do that. Otherwise, just go in there and play their own game.
Here is now the updated bracket. Match number 3, that'll be our next matchup today, and that is a promotional match. The winner of our next matchup, that's Gilded Gladiators versus the Kaolin Wardens, will advance to group number 3, and the loser of match 3 will play later on in match number 5. Again, the final 3 matches we have today, all best of 3s. Match number 4 will be Highland Ravens versus the Hounds, and that one will be an elimination match. So our next matchup, promotional, the next 2 after that, 4 and 5, both sending teams home, and then our 5th and final, of course, promoting a team later on into this week as well. And this is such a unique format, Ro, because you get these best of 1s at the start, and you're like showing a little bit, but now we're going to get to see a bit more of the ebbs and flows in a best of 3.
Yeah, in a best of 1, you kind of just like, you give maybe your cheesy comp and try to just scratch out this one win, but in a best of 3, it's all about grit.
Right. Kaolin Wardens and the Gilded Gladiators had that grit in their best of 1s so far today, and they will now have a chance to move on to the next group. Our first best of 3 of the week, and that is the Wardens versus the Gladiators, coming up next.